Howdy doody, you've done it again. You are listening to BHouts. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are so glad that you are listening. You like that
We
one?
are. Howdy doody. Howdy doody.
Well, howdy doody. I'm just trying to be silly and have fun.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. All right, ready?
Yes.
All right. You are listening to another very calm, soothing BH chat.
With Kevin Coots and Rachel Coots. Thank you so much for tuning in. We so appreciate you guys. We always want to remind you that BA Chat exists because we believe in the power of the testimony.
Yep, and testimony means do it again, God.
So when God has done something wonderful once, that means he'd love to do it 200 million, quadrillion, 1,800 times. And so when you hear a wonderful testimony on BA Chats, it's appropriate and proper that your heart leap and you say, Father, do that again. And it might be that specific thing. Like we've had people in here that have been healed from cancer. And if you're fighting cancer, yes, let your heart leap and say, Father, do that again.
It's your invitation into it.
Or it could just be the response to just Jesus through people and manifesting himself in whatever way that it is that you need him in your life. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So just a response to anybody's testimony. It's healthy that we go, do that. And me too, me too, me too.
I receive it. Me too. And so, and the second reason we have BA Chats is because here at Bethel Atlanta, it's like we have gold all around us all the time. And people don't know the stories of the gold that they're bumping into every Sunday at church. And so 5 minutes that you have a conversation with somebody just walking through the property, like how can you really actually get to know somebody? And so this is our way to introduce you to some of the gold that's around you and get to know the staff that's in our body.
And while all people are wonderful, well, I tell you what, the stories of people at Bethel Atlanta, just hearing and obeying the Lord are wild.
They really are.
They are totally worth sharing.
We thought our story was like this phenomenon. And then
We had never known anybody take such risk.
yeah, and there's people like that all over the place.
We're like, oh, you guys did the same thing.
Yeah.
Really? It's a whole church of us?
We're all here. Yeah.
So that's BA Chats, and tonight we have got some guests that we adore.
We are so excited to introduce you to these two chunks of gold in our midst
Giants.
all of the time. Derek and Sarah Ermatinger. Boom!
That's right.
Welcome, you guys. Oh, we're so glad you're here. How are you doing?
We're doing so good. We're super excited to be here.
Oh, well, thank you for coming in. We're longtime friends, some of our favorite people in the whole world.
Yes,
We
we,
would say
love
the
you
same.
guys.
Okay, well, introduce yourselves to our listeners. Let's start with you, sweet Sarah. What do you do here in our Bethel group of folks?
So, what do I do at Bethel? One thing, I help lead on the third year team for BASM, so at the ministry school. So that is super fun. This year was my first year doing that, so I finished going through school last year and then joined the third year team this past year.
Which we totally want to hear experiences from third year, because I know you guys had some great ones.
We do. Yeah. Third year is great.
So what capacity do you serve in third year?
So as a revival group pastor.
Got it. Okay.
It's your revival group pastor.
Oh, yes.
What about you, Derek?
Well, I'm a first-year revival group pastor, and I've been doing that. Oh, yeah, first year. Love serving on that team with Kevin, a bunch of other great people.
Yeah.
And I've been doing that this is just the 6th year that I've done that, which is kind of incredible.
It is incredible, Derek. 6 years.
Yeah.
Now, for the 3 years that I was on staff with first year, you were my revival group pastor friend. Partner.
Yeah.
I have been receiving the blessing of the Coots for a long time.
We say the same about the Ermatingers. But you got to share. Our last names are obviously not the most common last names. And honestly, just now I realized y'all's name was not Ermatinger, but it's Ermatinger.
It is.
Correct.
Okay. That is the first time in my life that I have ever known that.
I'm so sorry.
I don't know. And we had to share it. We're like, I know, people don't ever call us the Kuntses. We don't know why. When we walk into places with our whole big family, hi, it's the Kuntz. Like there's one of us.
It's just the singular.
I know, the singular Koontz.
Maybe
So
it's the
You're
the
just so
Z.
united as a family.
Yeah.
that's what it is. It's prophetic.
Maybe people couldn't just really handle the power of the ises, the kuntzes. It's just too much.
Yeah,
It's too much. Only
It's
one.
totally
it's a lot of
happening.
power.
Well, okay, so let's start again with you, Sarah. Third year, what was something wonderful? What was an encounter? What was your takeaway from the year? Anything third year that you just, what was this year like for you on the leadership team?
Yeah, so I really love, I feel like it was kind of last year and this year combined, because last year I was in the class. Then this year I felt like I just got round 2 of it and got to share as well as be in there. Just felt like I was learning again. But Dan Weber, the third year director, is really great teacher. And I feel like just being in his class, getting to serve him, kind of felt like it honestly unlocked my mind a little bit. Like,
Wow.
taught me how to think and just a lot of freedom in how I think about things. And just, one of those core statements of like not teaching you what to think, but teaching you how to think. Mm-hmm. And so that's something that he does really well. And just being in that room for 2 years has been super awesome. I've learned a lot.
Would you recommend the school to anybody?
I don't know. Yes, I definitely would.
How has it affected your life, being a student and then again now on the leadership team?
I would say meeting my spouse was
That's
pretty
a
effective.
Pretty big one.
Oh yeah.
Definitely biggest effect, besides the personal growth and getting deeper into the heart of the Lord. I am now
change.
married, which I was not. But yeah, me and Derek met when I was a first-year student, and he was a first-year revival group pastor. So, luckily, I was not in his revival group, or that could have been a little more awkward. But
It worked out well because I just avoided you for the first half of the school year, and then when I couldn't avoid you anymore, I said, "Hey, I don't date students, but I'm interested in you."
Yeah, that's how that sentence was started. I don't date students. So are you interested at all?
yeah,
But it was great because then we got to know each other, just hanging out in kind of friend groups, and then we went on our first date the Friday after she graduated, which was very close to 3 years ago from today.
Because you guys are people of high integrity. I love this.
Yes.
I remember I was here for this whole process.
That's right.
Matter of fact, I was brainstorming. I'm like, who could Derek date? And I had brainstormed somebody that was not Sarah because I didn't know anything about Sarah. So I came up to Derek one night and I was like, Derek, I have an idea. And he was like, Rach, I think you had asked Sarah out. You went, I asked out Sarah. Wait, what was your
Yeah.
main name?
Robertson.
Robertson. Oh my gosh. I'm like, I asked out Sarah Robertson. I was like, what? Oh, forget my idea. Yours is way better. She's awesome. I remember telling you, if you could, or no, you were about to. Because
I
remember
can't
thinking,
remember the timing of it, but it was around the same time. Yeah.
well, I remember telling you, if she goes out with you, Derek, whoa.
That's how I
remember
felt.
hearing that. Yep. She came home. She was like, Derek. The squeals of joy.
that's awesome.
But you guys waited until school was over and then you asked Sarah out. Tell us a little bit about that story.
Well, our first date lasted 7 hours long.
That's when you know it's good, right?
It was like
Totally.
sitting at the park after having sushi and coffee, and we were just hanging out on the bench talking for a long time, and then all of a sudden we're like, "Oh, it's 1:00 in the morning. We should probably go back home."
No, I think we didn't even know what time it was till we got back to your car, and it was
Oh,
like
yeah.
1:45.
Yeah, that sounds more right.
Yeah.
Did you guys know right away?
No, I feel like it was. I've never had the expectation going into any kind of relationship where it's like I'm going to figure out if this is the one or not right away. I just was like, I really enjoyed it. I had a great time, and I feel like it was so easy to have fun together, and just the conversation just was really pleasant and easy. So that was a great sign.
7 hours. Okay. Good start. Good
Yeah.
start.
And from there, just kind of dated for a little while. I think we became officially boyfriend girlfriend around June 23rd.
Around the exact
Around
date.
that time.
I remember it
Derek
exactly.
knows.
Sorry, I was being humble.
Yeah. Way to be. Just say it.
It was at
Just own it.
3:20 p.m.
Yeah.
Just kidding. I actually don't know that.
I don't know. I remember where it was. It was actually at the Chattahoochee Coffee Shop up in, is that technically Smyrna?
Wow.
Sarah.
Yeah.
You know what?
Sarah, this guy loves you.
And
knows
always
this.
I
has.
remember too.
Yeah, she does. She's got really good memory too. And then, from there, just hanging out all the time, growing a relationship. She was doing second year at the time, from then on, and then third year. And then, what I guess the timing was as soon as we got, kind of skipping ahead in the timeline, but as soon as we got back from, the honeymoon that you went into third year staff. And I mean, we knew you were going to get onto it beforehand, but it's just been
It was hopping.
Yeah.
I remember that season when you guys got married. It was just 7 months ago. But it all happened at once, it seemed like.
Yeah. The preparation season is kind of a blur because it's just you take care of so many details and make so many decisions, and then the day is there and it's like, and it was incredible for us. Just it was like everything we could have asked for and more.
It was
really.
beautiful.
It was
It
beautiful.
was a
Wouldn't you say?
beautiful ceremony.
It's one of our favorite weddings ever. We decided. It was
It was.
beautiful.
Wow.
Thank you. Yeah, it was wonderful. Definitely our favorite.
All right, Derek, tell us a little bit about first year. After 6 years of being a revival pastor on first year, what in the world? Could you even pick a favorite moment?
Oh man, yeah, it's really hard to pick a favorite moment. After doing it for 6 years, a lot of it blends together.
Oh, my
I
word.
bet.
But always, every year, my favorite moments are when people have kind of like the God encounter
Yeah.
and everything changes. There's been so many people who will come to the school and, they're either in this, a lot of times they're just in a kind of a rough spot with God, like they might be a little burnt out or something like that. But then all of a sudden they have like this love encounter with God after going through like a fire tunnel or something. And they're never the same. Like all of a sudden they're refreshed. All of a sudden they feel this love connection like they've never felt before with God, and something's just completely restored inside of them. And those are some of the moments that I'm just so proud to be a part of an environment that is teaching and hosting this type of experience for people. But that happens every year. You just never know when someone's going to have their day of breakthrough. So.
Yeah. One of the things I really love about Derek, and I hear this often when just talking to different staff people and talking to different students, is that like when you counter Derek, it's like chill mode. Like, he's the most chill person you'll ever meet. Like laid back, very easygoing. But what I always hear is he impacted me so greatly, or he gave me a perfect word in a season, and then when he stands up to speak and facilitates what God wants to do in a room, it is beautiful.
It is.
And I
Thanks.
hear that from other people, and I see it and experience it as well. But we're just so grateful to have, well, obviously have both of you in our environment. It's really, really great.
Yeah, thank you. Wow.
Yeah.
Derek, tell us a little bit about the things that you regularly teach during first year, because I
Okay.
know you have your strength zones,
Yeah.
baby, and they
Right,
bring a lot of
right.
strengths.
One of my favorite things to teach, in the school, I'll help April Healy teach an elective of the encounters. We call it the encounters elective. And essentially this is just taking trips to heaven. I was thinking about it the other day. I was like, really, God's language, his first language isn't English, nor is it just, using words all the time. When we're encountering God with our imagination, it's just like praying with him, but using our imagination to pray with him. But there's an aspect of it that's, real too, because we're seated in heavenly places. And so I love teaching people how to access this type of connection with Jesus, because it's already available and they already have everything they need. And Jesus just usually encounters them in really powerful ways. And I probably got hooked on it because of my very first time that I ever learned about it, which was a really fascinating time. I learned from April Healy. She was like my first instructor on that, and she, kind of taught me like, okay, this is what you do. I was in the class with everybody else and laid down in the room somewhere just to kind of rest and let my mind, connect with God. And I saw a bunch of different visions, and in my imagination of me and Jesus going places. But he took me back at one point to a specific memory in my past where At the time, I was dropping off this girl I was dating at her house, and she was about to turn to me and say, "You're not very fun or exciting." And so I'm watching this memory play out in like third person, and I'm wondering, why is Jesus bringing me back to this memory? Because it's a hurtful memory. And I'm watching it kind of play out, and then right before she actually says those words, Jesus jumps in between us and says, "No, you're fun, you're wonderful, and you're exciting." And he reaches over to my chest and pulls out this little silver needle, and he says, "Look how small that was."
Oh, wow.
And I immediately start feeling warmth on my chest. And so I'm like, wow, that was really cool, because I actually felt warmth like in the natural. I felt warmth on my chest, even though I'm seeing all this with my imagination. But literally, it was Jesus bringing me back to a moment of pain and lies and speaking the truth of who I am. It was like a mini sozo, really.
It was. I mean, that's healing. That's heart healing.
And so, I love kind of helping people, facilitate people to have encounters like that with Jesus. So that's definitely one of my favorite topics.
That's beautiful. I've never heard the story.
Yeah. My other thing that I really like to teach a lot at school ministry is on healing. Mm-hmm. It's a big passion of mine, because that's really kind of what started my journey with God. I grew up Christian, but I didn't know anything about healing. I was never taught about healing. I didn't know about the gifts of the Spirit, or that you could hear God's voice in a way other than the Bible. Yeah. And I was really sick one day, just to kind of summarize it real quick. I was really sick one day, and my friend Jed decided to pray for me after I was telling him about all the problems. And first prayer, nothing. Second prayer, completely healed of all these flu symptoms. And it just blew my mind. It blew every box and paradigm I had of what God was like, and what a relationship with God could be like. And so, because of that experience, it radically transformed my whole life and set me on this journey, which actually then led me to Bethel, Atlanta. But now I love to teach how easy it is to pray for healing, and how easy it is, because God wants people to be healed, and how easy it is to partner with him in that, and to step out in courage and to do that, and how to navigate all the ins and outs of, just being with Jesus and growing intimacy with him, and healing others around you. So that's another big passion of mine for various reasons.
Oh my gosh, for obvious reasons. I love it. You're one of my favorite teachers in healing.
Oh, thanks. You are too.
Thanks. We talk a lot about it at the school. Sarah, were you raised knowing about supernatural healing, or was that something that you learned at Bethel?
So I learned it, option C, before Bethel, but not when I was growing up. So mostly I went to college at University of Georgia, and one really big campus ministry out there is the Wesley Foundation. Mm-hmm. And my sister was super involved there. So she ended up interning there for 3 years. They allow an internship. And I ended up volunteering with Young Life while I was in college, but just had lots of friends do Wesley. And
you are so perfect for Young Life. You are so
fun. It was so fun, yeah. So I did Young Life for like 5 years as a leader.
Oh my gosh, Sarah, I wish that I would have been in your Young Life group.
Yeah.
I know.
It was fun. I was especially good at the skits, I think, I will say.
Which remind us, we have to come back and explain that. Okay.
Yeah. But so my sister, I think she was probably the one to really introduce me to some of the more like healing and supernatural aspects of the Lord through her involvement at Wesley, because they were very open to it and learning, and would play Bethel music and things like that. So I kind of mine was sort of like a slow easing into it. But when my summer after my sophomore year of college, I went on a missions trip to Peru for 2 months. And that was with Adventures in Missions. They're the organization that like does World Race and all that. So they do like college age trips and stuff too. So I went with them to Peru, and that was really the first time that I was like diving more fully into it all.
Sure.
So just really like being around people who would talk about the Holy Spirit. Like I remember our leader during training saying the Holy Spirit's a he, not an it, and that blew my mind. I was like, what? Holy Spirit's a he? Or like, what? And then just like being with these people for 2 months all summer, just and I remember what's funny is healing is probably one of the first ones, like gifts and supernatural things that I was introduced to as well, because on that trip, I remember spending some time with the Lord at one point, and I was reading through this list of, the gifts of the Spirit, and I'm like, all my life being like, well, I don't know which gifts I have, like, which gifts do I have, like, sort of viewing it like a personality test, like you need to take your spiritual gifting quiz and find out what you have. And
Holy Spirit Enneagram.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So I'm talking to the Lord about it, and he's like, well, it's a gift. It's not a personality test. Like, it's a gift. Which one do you want? I can give any of them to you.
That's
and I was
beautiful.
like, oh. So I'm just kind of looking at this list, and I don't remember which of the chunks of verses it was, but I was like, oh, healing sounds cool. And he's like, okay, great. Why don't you ask for that? And I was like, okay. And then, literally the whole summer, we saw so many physical healings. It was wild.
Wow.
So that definitely was like, that trip is just one of the most life-changing 2 months I've had. Awesome. And was actually very hard to come back from, because I came back from that, returned to, I had 2 years left in college, which I loved college. It was just a wonderful time.
Sure.
But it was definitely, you have this like crazy life-changing experience that blows your mind with all these people who are doing radical things, and you come back, and I had wonderful, wonderful friends who loved the Lord, which was so helpful and sweet. But it was really hard for me to, I think it was hard too, because I would come back, and I remember a few times praying for people for healing, going, oh, this happens now, and I have this gift, and it not happening. And it felt really confusing and really hurtful that, like, I would see it happen on that Peru trip, but I wouldn't see it happen when I came back. And so, yeah, it was an interesting transition. But, the whole time I still, it was like, okay, I just trust you in the mystery a little bit. But I did I let go of a little bit of, like, super intense, passionate about that, just because I was like, I don't really know what to do with this. But yeah, and then... once I came to Bethel, Atlanta, obviously learned a lot more, and that definitely increased my just exposure and experience.
How did you get to Bethel, Atlanta?
So I had, like all good Christians in Atlanta, had been listening to Bethel music for several years and had no idea that this place existed.
Oh my goodness. That is just about every single person that's been on the podcast.
Right.
It's like, what? There's a what? Where?
Yeah. So I was in Athens for 4 years in college, Athens, Georgia, which is about an hour and a half away from Atlanta. And I grew up just outside of Atlanta. So I'm from around here, and my parents still live in Snellville, where I grew up. And so after college, I moved to Costa Rica for a year, and I was doing Young Life there. So I was the Young Life leader at international schools in Costa Rica, and so connected to that Peru trip. During that trip, I had gotten really passionate about healing, right? So when I came back, I met this lady at our church my church in Athens, who did inner healing. And she was like, oh, you are interested in physical healing. Have you ever heard of emotional or inner healing? I was like, no, what's that? Because I was suddenly super passionate about this. And so she just started mentoring me, and I went to some of her like training weekends on inner healing. And so I just was like super passionate about it. And so the year I was in Costa Rica, I was Skyping her one time, and I'm like, hey, I don't know how to keep growing in this. And she was like, oh, well, check out Sozo. And I'm like, what's Sozo? And she's like, oh, it's a Bethel tool. You can order the book from the Bethel store. So I like buy the Sozo training from the Bethel store while I'm living in Costa Rica.
Like online? You do?
Yeah, online. Because I could download the MP3, and then I had a friend who was coming to visit me over her spring breaks. This is in like March. And so I had the book, like the handbook, mailed to her house, and she brought it with her to me so that I would sit in my Costa Rican apartment training myself on Sozo. Like I'd be filling out the workbook and listening. And the whole time I have no idea there's Bethel, Atlanta, and so I'm like, okay, cool. And then, so then during that year, it was like this whole year of just dreaming with the Lord of like, what am I going to do after this year? And he just brought up all these dreams and passions for different things, like, acting and theater that I've always loved, and him just giving me a heart for that. And, so I end up by the end of the year being like, okay, yeah, I feel really sure about moving back to Atlanta. And so, when I moved back, I moved in with my parents, which was just amazing. I'm so glad I was able to do that for a year.
Your parents are great.
They are great. Yes, they are good ones. So I was in Snellville, and my sister, Rachel, who I mentioned earlier, she had a couple good friends of hers lived in Atlanta and were going to Bethel, Atlanta at the time. So I was starting to look for churches in Atlanta, and Rachel suggested to try out Bethel, Atlanta. And I was like, wait, this church? The church that I was like doing their sozo thing on and who did this music? They have a church here? And she was like, yeah, that's where I go to church if I lived in Atlanta. You should check it out. So I went with two friends of mine. One friend was a close friend who had also just moved to Atlanta, so we were like hoping to find a church together. And one was a friend just in town visiting, and we went. It was when I was at the ABC building, and I remember feeling like I just felt like it was home right when I walked in.
Wow.
Felt like I walked into family. I felt like, and it, worship isn't like this every day, but worship was so powerful that day, and people were just like jumping up and down, like everyone was like celebrating. And I remember just being like, this feels like I'm in heaven. Like people are just
beautiful,
celebrating.
Yeah, so good.
And it was really fun. And, so then after we left, I'm like, man, I so wish I could go to that church, but it's an hour away. Like I was like living in Stelpa at the time, and so later I'm journaling about it with the Lord, and he's like, well, I mean, you have a car. Like, okay. That's true.
I do. You're right. I have a car.
I do have a car. And my friend ended up picking a different church in town that's a wonderful church. So I kind of, for a few months, sort of went back and forth visiting both, trying to pick. And, once I found one of the life groups here, the life group that used to meet in Smyrna, Vinings. And so that had people our age and just made it helpful because I was like, okay, I have people I can be friends with. I can commit to this church. But it really felt like family immediately. And I just remember hearing the Lord say, like, this is your home. This is your family. And I didn't know a single person there, but I was like, okay. I've never felt this way when looking for a church before. It just was wild. So.
Wow. Good story.
So that's how I got here. So, and then it was 2 years later that I decided to do school. So me and Derek always laughed at, we always wonder how many times we were like standing right next to each other at church and didn't know it,
Yeah.
Because you didn't meet each other till school.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, you guys, that's a good story.
So good. Now you guys have been married for 7 months.
7 months.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Wedded
7
bliss.
glorious months.
Yes.
Isn't it fun?
Oh, it's the best.
I'm always so happy for people to get married.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a good thing.
It's a
Yeah.
good
God
thing.
had a good idea.
He had a
He
good
did.
idea.
He really did. Yeah.
So now that you're 7 months in, like now you're about to like embark on this like massive journey.
Mm-hmm.
You have
Can
a
tell us
new
little-
adventure.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about it? About what's happening?
Yeah, we definitely
Yeah,
can. Do you
course.
want to tell them what's happening?
Sure. So we are going to Iris Global's Harvest School this summer.
Yay!
Wow.
Wow.
That is
Such a big deal.
That's
So share
huge.
it for folks that don't know about Iris. Tell us about Iris.
Yeah, so they're a worldwide ministry. They have locations in countries all over the world. Their kind of main, I guess, most popular, known for hub would be in Mozambique with Heidi and Roland Baker. So they're the ones who started Iris. They've been missionaries in Mozambique for over 20 years.
wow.
Yeah, and they're wild. So I just finished reading one of our books that we have to read for homework is their book called Always Enough. And it's like their story of being missionaries and just these, they have just done some crazy stuff. And
I would totally recommend that book.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
it's a great book.
It's amazing. It's just it's one story after another of just the miraculous provision of the Lord. It's
Yeah.
shocking. I mean, they are wild. That's a good word.
Yeah.
Do we have that book?
Yes, we
Look
have.
it out. Get out.
I think I read it for the first time, and it was part of homework for first year.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
been in the curriculum a couple times.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
cool.
it's good. So we are going there this year. This year it's actually not in Mozambique because of just difficulties getting visas to the country right now. So just different things going on in Mozambique. They decided not to have it there this year.
Because there was a lot of political unrest, wasn't there?
Yes, there was last year. And so this year they're just not having it there. So this year is actually a mobile school, which we're super excited about. The first 2 weeks are in Scotland.
What?
I know.
Scotland.
Yes.
Yeah, Scotland. That was British. I can't do Scottish. I try every time.
Scottish.
Yeah, I just can't. It's fine.
That was like a British accent, though.
It sounded, I liked it, Sarah.
Thank you. I'll take it.
You sound Scottish.
Yeah, Kevin's was good. And then the second 2 weeks are in Israel, and then the last month is in Madagascar.
Oh, you guys.
Wow.
So how did this happen? How did you decide on Harvest?
Well, a couple of things happened. So, a little backstory. I've actually been applying to get into a master's program for counseling at GSU, and I'd previously been denied once. And so, last year around October or so, we were over at our friends Kyle and Celeste Wishing's, their house. They were actually sharing all about their experience having just gone through the Harvest School. And so we were hearing about it in detail.
Which we have had them on, and they told us about it in detail. So we have a BA chat with the Wishings.
We sure do.
Yes, we do.
Cue that one up.
That's right.
Yeah.
You guys can
Get it?
find it right Podbean, where you find all these.
Yeah, and so we were just listening to them talk about the school, and I had this thought go through my mind and heart. And I had actually just finished, maybe a couple weeks prior, filling out my second application for the master's program. And I thought to myself, maybe if I don't get into GSU again, I'll just go to Harvest School. And I just have the thought, I'm like, I'll talk to Sarah later, because, we're still freshly married. We always got to talk about stuff. We're trying to over-communicate instead of under-communicate.
Good job, you guys.
Smart man.
You won't be sorry.
I had some good wisdom there. And so we get in the car, and Sarah says that she had the exact same thought. And I
Oh,
was
that's
like,
great.
okay.
That's great.
A couple months later, find out that I didn't get into GSU again. Kind of bummed about that. But then we started praying about going to Harvest School, and just really felt like it was on the Lord's heart to bring us to Harvest School, that He had something important there for us. And so we're like, okay, let's do this. Let's apply. And so we applied, and we got accepted and celebrated, and we've been fundraising for a while. But it's been so exciting watching God show up in this process of getting ready for Harvest School.
Oh, you guys.
So can you tell us some of the ways that he showed up? I'd love to hear that.
So we had to create kind of an initial budget, fundraising, goal.
Okay.
And we had just, we're like, okay, we feel like it's going to have to be a lot. It's going to, because it's traveling school and the insurances and, the medicines, all these different things. And we're like, okay, I think we're going to need $20,000.
Because all missionaries fund themselves. And so
Right.
you guys are coming up, you fund yourself to go on these.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're raising money for our tuition, raising money for the, the cost of the flights, stuff like that.
Sure.
And so we post it, I think it was on a Sunday night. Monday night, a friend of ours comes up to us and says, I'm going to give you $1,000. And I feel like there's going to be 19 other people who do the same thing. And we're like,
Whoa.
okay, well, great. That's a great start. And so we're like, okay, this is cool. This feels like the Lord so far. The next day, someone came and gave us $1,000.
Oh my goodness.
Another person. And then that weekend, someone gave us $1,000. And then a couple of weeks later, we got like $2,000 from somebody. And it hasn't always come in $1,000 chunks. But there have been a lot of them. And honestly, it's so funny because I fundraised to go to Cameroon on a mission trip like 8 years ago when I was a second-year student. I was more stressed about raising $2,000 at that time than I've ever been in this process of raising $20,000.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, we both said it's just so much money that we have to raise so fast, because we got into school mid-March. By the time we applied and everything, got accepted, it was like mid-March, and our tuition was due April 25th. So we were like, so we have like a month and a half to raise most of this money, and knew by about that deadline would be when we needed to buy flights as well. So, I mean, I just was like, shoot, it's so much money and so quick. Like, I don't even feel stressed, because that's got to be Jesus. Like, I'll be proactive, but I'm like, it's just too much to even feel the pressure on myself. So, but it's been awesome. So,
that feels super powerful.
Yeah.
So we always open up the floor on BA Chats for you guys to speak into our listeners. Podcasts are wonderful. I mean, people could be literally listening in Mozambique or in
it's
Madagascar.
wild.
So
That's so cool.
it's so much fun. But why don't you guys speak into that? Because who knows how many missionaries are raising money now, or people in ministry are raising money to just support
Yeah,
themselves.
absolutely.
So what would you guys say to them? And would you like to speak something and release something into folks listening?
Sure. Yeah, I feel like one thing that I love about fundraising is it feels super special, not just having people give you money to be able to go, but also it really feels like a spiritual covering and backing of like you are having people join you in this. Like we are going into this summer, not just the two of us. It's like these 50 people who are giving us money, having invested into it. And I really believe that when you're giving to something like that, you really get a piece of the pie. Like you get some of that spiritual breakthrough that those people are going and digging in. And so it felt really sweet, having our friends go last year and then us getting to go this year and just sewing into their trip, and now seeing, just seeing the way that it all plays out of like the Lord then putting it on our hearts to go, and just the way he's totally blessed us. And I mean, it really is, I think there's such a beautiful thing of trusting the Lord to like stir up generosity in people's hearts. Like we haven't had to beg anyone for money, like, and I think there's a big piece of being super proactive and being diligent and consistent in like, whether it's emails or letters or phone calls, however, honestly, the Holy Spirit leads you.
Sure.
Because I think that is a fun piece too, is that there's not an exact formula. And I feel like every time I fundraise, I do it a little differently. Because it's like, oh, this time it looks like this, and this time it looks like this. And but just that he's so faithful and to put you on people's minds, because he's always thinking of you. Like he hasn't forgotten what you need. And so it's just been really cool.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, I would say one of the big things for me, kind of in the early onset, I think before we had even posted anything about raising money, I was just, praying to God. And I was talking to him about like, this is a lot. Like, I don't know how this is going to work. Just kind of like having those doubtful thoughts.
Sure.
And I just heard him so clearly. He's like, I'm really good at opening doors, and I'm really good at keeping doors closed if I want them to be.
Derek.
And I was like, okay. So if this is what you're doing, if this is the door that you're opening for us, like you're going to make it happen. And I can trust in you that this is where you're leading me, because we heard clearly that this is where you want us to go.
That's good.
And so just kind of following him and trusting him that, he's going to make the journey clear.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's beautiful. So I heard trust, listen, trust, and listen, and obey.
Yeah. Exactly. That's the formula.
We need a shirt. Trust plus trust plus trust plus obey plus obey plus trust plus trust.
Well, so what are you guys looking forward to with this summer, with Harvest? Like, what are you seeing? What are you feeling? What is the Lord saying about what's about to happen to you guys? What are you walking into?
Yeah, so it feels very weighty of like almost feels like we're coming in, like just literally coming to the feet of Jesus and being totally open to having him break open our boxes. Like,
awesome.
Because I feel like even in an environment at Bethel, like no matter how free and wonderful your environment is, you're still going to have God in a box in some sense,
Because he's ginormous.
He's just so big. Like he's going to be breaking our boxes for the rest of eternity. Yeah. And so I just feel like it's just really exciting this summer to go and see and dive even deeper into his heart, to see new sides of him we haven't met before, to have some of our paradigms about him like broken, and just be like, oh, Jesus, I didn't even know I had you in this box. And honestly, that feels like in a good way, a little nerve wracking. Like, oh man, I kind of know what I think, and I'm in a good place with the Lord, and I pursue him passionately, but like, ooh, what are you about to do, Jesus? Like, what are you going to challenge me with? What am I going to have to change? And I think just going into it, knowing that, and like, but hungry for like, if there's something about you that I don't know, it doesn't matter if it means I have to change. Like, I want to know who you are.
That's
and,
awesome. Really great.
And I think for me, one big thing is, I know that Heidi and Roland Baker, who this school is with, are very passionate about the poor, about being like on trash dumps and giving your all. And like, even reading just their first book or two, they're very like, you die for Jesus. And I mean, they're like really all out, and which is so beautiful. And, I'm curious to see what happens when we come back, as far as like being worked with the poor and homeless and things like this. But I feel like even if we don't feel like, oh, now we're called to go work with poor people all the time, there's still a face of Jesus that's in those people that we might not know yet. And so even if it's not that their calling is the same as our calling, they still know a part of the Lord's heart that we need to know, because we want to know him completely, whether we're like working with those people or whether it's with different people. We still want to know Jesus as fully as we can. And so
It's beautiful, Sarah.
so I'm super excited for that. And, that summer in Peru that I talked about earlier, there was one time in that summer that I had this moment with the Lord, just talking about intimacy with him and just asking him for like the greatest intimacy anyone had ever experienced with the Lord. One of our leaders kind of tempted us with asking the Lord for that. And I was like, yeah, I want that. So I'm like having this moment with the Lord and just kind of felt the weight of it, but also had no idea what that even meant. I didn't even know what was available. And that was one thing when we were praying about doing the school this summer, that the Lord brought back that memory and just kind of this invitation to, again, come away for a summer and just step so much deeper into his heart. So I'm just excited for intimacy with him. I'm excited to be challenged and changed and to grow. And so, yeah.
It's beautiful, Sarah.
Yeah.
What about you, Derek?
Well, it's interesting the timing of going to Harvest School. For myself, when I first started coming to, actually, let me back up. When I first got healed 10 years ago, it was not too much longer after that I found myself sitting in the church parking lot crying out to God, like, I want God in my life. And this is when I was still discovering, like, you just had my box broken of like, God could actually heal people. And so I cried out to God, and I want you in my life. And he showed up in miraculous ways. I started seeing healings all around me and gifts of the Spirit, things like that. And like I said, that ultimately led me to move to Bethel, Atlanta. But I'm originally from Michigan, Holland, Michigan, land of the tulips and the Dutch people. And I kind of took this big risk and was like, okay, I'm 20 years old. I feel like God's calling me to move to Bethel, Atlanta. I don't know anybody. I don't have a job down there yet. I'm just going to take this risk, move down here. And I did that, and I fell in love with this place right away and came back for a second year and a third year, and then got to be on staff with first year. And so 5 years into this journey, I'm in church, and God says, it's been 5 years. And I was like, 5 years about, since that day. It's been 5 years almost to the exact day. And I'm hearing the Lord say that you laid down your life to get to know me more. You moved away from your family. You sacrificed to just grow in your intimacy with me. I want to see what you can build with the next 5 years of your life.
Wow, Derek.
I'm like, okay, great. And so I go on this journey of learning with the Lord what it looks like to build your life in a sense. And he's showing me all about like having internal goals versus external goals and what it looks like to grow in fruits of the Spirit and things like that. And, along the way, I got my bachelor's degree and I got married, which is the hugest thing.
The hugest.
And the best so far. But what's really interesting is as soon as we get to Harvest School, that's going to be the end of that second 5-year period. And
wow, Derek.
It feels like this really special timing of God to even lead us out there at this time so that, I can be like, hey, Jesus, this is what I've done with the last 5 years of my life. What do you want to do next?
Oh, wow.
And
so fantastic.
I'm really expecting, a lot of just fresh vision from the Lord. And it's so exciting to have Sarah alongside me in this process. And it just feels really special. I'm really, really excited for what God's going to do in that respect. And a lot of what Sarah was saying is very true for myself too. I understand very much that as much freedom as I've been growing in the last 10 plus years, there's still more to be had.
That's awesome.
And that freedom isn't just like I just get to live in more personal freedom and just enjoy it for myself. I live in a freedom in such a way that it's going to impact the lives of people around me.
It's beautiful.
Because the kingdom can flow through me more freely.
It's beautiful.
And so I'm just looking forward to getting out there in the dirt and, with Heidi Baker and whoever else and loving and serving people and learning from them and kind of just letting God kind of tear some stuff down and build some stuff up and see what he does.
Awesome.
It's so great. So when do you guys go?
We will arrive in Scotland 4 weeks from today.
Oh, you guys are
Yeah.
so close.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is, when will this podcast drop?
So we will leave May 29th. We might
Oh, wow.
be there when this podcast drops.
Yes, possibly.
Is there any place we can follow the adventure? Or
Yeah, is there a place where you can follow adventure, or maybe a place where somebody can give if they want to? Like, hey, this is a space that we have open. We'd love if you want to tell people about that. That'd be great.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember our website off the top of my head.
Yeah, so
Should I pull up my phone? Y'all can keep talking.
Yeah, if you type in like something like Wix, WIX, Derek Ermatinger, Sarah Ermatinger,
Do you
Adventures.
have it on Facebook?
that's Tinger,
Yeah, Ermatinger.
not
So we mostly have been using a MailChimp, like an email
Yeah,
list.
MailChimp.
So if people know us, you can reach out to us and send us your email, and we will add you to our MailChimp. We do have that Wix website that we started in order to also like post the old emails kind of as blogs so
Sure,
people
sure.
can catch up, but we can't remember the exact name of the website at the moment.
It's
But the
brand new.
biggest thing is send us your emails, and also anything to give to the trip. It's all would be directly to us, because since it's for a school, it's actually not tax deductible.
Okay.
So people could like Cash App or Venmo or PayPal us.
Okay.
Do you have a GoFundMe page too?
We do.
Or-
We do have a GoFundMe page.
Oh.
We have used it only a little bit,
Okay, gotcha.
but yeah, you can
If you
go to
want to
that
read
too.
that web link.
Okay, guys. So Sarah and Derek have a Cash App link that you can go to. It's their handle. It's $Sarah with an HR 90. So you can give that way. Another way that you can give is through PayPal, and it's the link is paypal.me/Derek Ermatinger, spelled ERMATINGER. They also have a Venmo account that you can go to, and it's @Derek-Ermatinger. And then the last one is Google Pay. You guys are so savvy. So the handle is d.ermatinger@gmail.com. Super simple.
Yeah, and we have a website, which is https://dermatinger.wixsite.com/adventures. It's just www.gofundme.com/Derek Sarah, and that's Sarah with an H, and then -Harvest School. So gofundme.com/Derek Sarah -Harvest School.
There you go.
Oh, you
Here it
guys. So exciting. Oh, so when you come back, would you guys come and do another BA chat?
Oh, we would
Oh.
love to.
And tell us about the
1,000%.
We would
Yes.
love to.
You will have so much to tell, we know.
Yeah.
Oh, you
Yeah.
guys.
So fun.
Well, thank you so much for being our guest on BA Chats. You guys are wonderful. We just bless you. I know you want to pray over them, don't you?
I do.
I know you. I can
I
feel
was
it.
like getting all kinds of stuff.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then we always open this up to listeners. So anything you're hearing, we've had words of knowledge on here, and people have gotten healed across the
Oh, that's
world.
awesome.
And yeah, it's been so
Yeah.
exciting. It's just so exciting because these are pre-recorded, but it's fun how the Lord is
Yeah.
working it out.
It
So.
is
Yeah.
fun.
So I just want to bless you, and I do say adventure, and just eyes to see and ears to hear. And Ephesians 3:20, more than you're asking for, more than you even know how to ask for, according to the power that works in you. So, Father, I thank you for just stirring up that power that works in them. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Father, thanks. I thank you for just a life-changing. I feel like you guys are going to get a whole lot of vision. Things are going to be very clear. You're going to see some things that are going to make, Derek, I love your 5-year thing. Your next 5 years are going to be made very, very clear. You guys will see.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
It's so good. Yeah, I was actually, when you were talking about the Lord breaking boxes, I really had that vision of the lady who came in and broke the alabaster jar on Jesus' feet, and she just never stopped ministering to him. And I felt like this is going to be just a season for you guys to just break open, like to break open just everything. That all of who you are, and it's going to be this beautiful aroma in this worship to Jesus that you're going to have such a discovery of the next season of your life while you're going and serving your heart out and loving people. And I felt like it's just going to be a beautiful aroma to the Lord. So, yeah, I just wanted to speak that over you guys.
Thank you.
So good.
All right, folks. Well, that is BA Chats. Again, thank you so much. We always want to remind you guys that you can get hold of these on, let's see, we've got Podbean. You can download Podbean. They're on the Bethel Atlanta app.
You go to the Bethel Atlanta app, under podcast. That's super easy. Or you can even check us out on podcast and iTunes platform as well. Yeah.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, under the Bethel Atlanta. We're bonus material. That's what it's called. Yeah.
Email us with anything you're hearing or seeing. Did you guys hear or see anything? Did you want to release
I
anything? Oh, you
did
saw Sarah.
real
I'm so
quick,
sorry.
if that's okay. I'll
No,
be
absolutely.
super
If that's
fast.
okay. No, show us.
I wanted to release healing of celiac disease. That was actually one of the ways me and Derek first started talking. When I was in first year, I got healed of celiacs. And when I shared the testimony, he was one of the people who stood up that also had gut troubles. So I prayed over him, and that's when we first started talking. But I wanted to release that. And then I also just felt, talking about that year in Costa Rica where I was dreaming with the Lord and hearing direction from him, that I just wanted to release dreaming over people and just freedom and permission to discover some of the dreams that the Lord's put in your heart, even if they don't feel to you like that would be what the Lord would call you to do, just giving you permission to really dream and discover what loves are in your heart, like what things you loved as a kid or things that make you come alive, and just ways that the Lord would actually call you into that and stir that inside you that you wouldn't expect.
That's helpful, Sarah.
That's really
Yeah.
good.
That's good.
Yeah, I had a little something too. I just really felt like that we're giving up permission to pursue God in a new way. I just feel like there's some people who have had this desire to grow in their knowledge of God, but haven't quite known how to grow in their knowledge of God, or just their intimacy or their relationship in general. And I just want to release a supernatural breakthrough in the ease of relationship with Jesus, that it wouldn't have to look like a specific thing that someone has taught before, but it can just be a natural expression of who you are with God. And I just want to release that freedom. So,
Yes. Ermatingers, thank you. We
Thank
love you. We bless you. Yay.
yay.
It's our favorite. Do you guys remember that Jesus loves you?
And we love you too.